We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the Monday Mashup. It's Robert Phoenix here, and it is Monday, the 18th of July, 2012. And we're back in the air. Took a little bit of a break on Friday. We had a great show on Wednesday with William Stick Evers. And if you've not listened to that show, please go back and get into the archive and check that out. It's a great show. William is a brilliant astrologer and working with some very interesting techniques, posing questions via the horary oracle, and trying to come up with some answers in terms of what's happening with the global economic situation and the domestic political situation. And I'm glad I was able to have him on the show, and I'll try to get him back on sometime again before the selection. Presidential selection. So I was away. I went away for about 3 days, and it's always interesting for me to leave my house. Number one, that's a good thing, leaving my house. And it's also very interesting for me to leave the confines of the Bay Area, because when you get out of the Bay Area, things look just a little different. Let me tell you, especially when you go to a place like Magic Mountain, which is where I went. It was at Magic Mountain for a one mega day, because I guess maybe you could do 2 days worth of Magic Mountain. Maybe. I can't. And I'm still going on roller coasters because, well, there's that in-between phase with your kid, right, where they're not quite ready to step up to the big coasters because they're not tall enough, so you've got to go on them with them. Well, my kid is kind of there, although he can probably go on most of them by himself. But he wants me to go on some of them with him, obviously, because it gives him a sense of confidence and he won't freak out. And it was good. I mean, some of these roller coasters, I got to tell you, they are hellacious. I mean, we've entered into a whole quantum universe of roller coasters. When they developed the roller coaster where you can sit in a harness, and instead of being strapped to a chair and riding the roller coaster like a car with the roller coaster beneath you, well, when they figured out that, well, why don't we put them in a harness and run the roller coaster from above them? Well, that changed the whole universe of roller coasters, because those harness roller coasters can do things that are almost sick. I mean, we're talking 180s, we're talking corkscrew turns. There's this one roller coaster, the Green Lantern. So now, Magic Mountain, by the way, went from being a Looney Tunes-based amusement park to a comic book-based amusement park, DC Comics in particular. And there are, I think, 5 characters that dominate the Magic Mountain superhero cosmology. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern. Those are your top 5 from Magic Mountain. So the Green Lantern, who is apparently is gay now. I don't know if you've been following this, but the Green Lantern is gay. This is a recent development, Hal Jordan. But I think that you could probably make a case that most superheroes are gay. I mean, think about that. Run around in spandex, overcompensating for their masculinity. Come on now. They're all gay. So anyway, the Green Lantern ride is one of these rides where you're in the harness and you're going down, right, and doing the corkscrews, which, you know, in the 360s, but they've added a twist. It can also spin. So as you're going around on these things, it's also spinning and, you know, creating kind of a vomit vortex. Now, luckily, I guess it must have been the hand of God, because we were in line for this thing for a half an hour, and they had a breakdown with it. So we actually wound up leaving, thank God, the Green Lantern. And we wound up going to Batman, which is a smaller version of the Green Lantern without the twisting. So one of the things, besides the rides and the humanity that we experienced at Magic Mountain, one of the things that really jumped out at me while we were at the hotel adjacent to Magic Mountain is that America is fat. I mean fat. There were people in this hotel, right, in the dining room that were enormous. Freaking enormous. And it wasn't just like one. You would see a family of enormous people. And then you look at their kids, you go, oh my God, next generation of enormous. This is, again, I live in a bubble. The Bay Area is a bubble. You know, we have good food, good weather. We generally take pretty good care of ourselves here. You know, it's not like LA where everybody's a trophy and you're trying to compete with the next person in terms of your body awareness. It's not like that. But it's clearly not the Magic Mountain model, or at least the Middle America model, the expanding Middle of America model. I was blown away. And then you look at what these people put on their plates and what they're eating. Enormous portions, enormous. And then so if you go to a place like I don't know. Let's take 7-Eleven, for example. If you go to 7-Eleven and you order a soda, you can't just, first of all, I do not recommend soda at all, period, end of story. Fructose, just get it out of the food system, period. First of all, it's corn syrup. It's like steroids and nitrous oxide version of sugar. And the other piece with corn syrup is obviously that corn is genetically modified. So you're getting genetically modified corn syrup. Not good. But if you go to 7-Eleven and you get a soda, and I've seen this. I don't buy the sodas, but I've seen this. Or you could go to any fast food chain. You get a soda now, it is minimum 18 ounces. Minimum 18 ounces. And why is that? Well, number one, they can charge you more for that soda. They make more profit off of charging you $1.75 or $1.85 for an 18-ounce soda than they would, say, charging you $1.25 for a 12-ounce soda. So they give you this illusion that you're getting more, but they're actually making more profit. The problem is you're getting, a huge amount of calories and craft sugar in those sodas. This is the default now. You go to get a soda, it's like at the minimum 18 ounces. Who the hell drinks an 18-ounce soda? I guess a lot of people do, because I was watching some very overweight people destroy their lives. And most people, unfortunately, are not hip to diet. They're not hip to what's in their food. And it's a tragedy, really. It's an utter tragedy. They eat shitty food, and they don't know any better. And they've got shitty lives, and the next thing you know, they're weighing 300-plus bills. They're miserable. Their bodies break down. They go to the doctors. They get on the allopathic treadmill. Now they're taking this for this and this for that. And my doctor gave me this, and then they feel even crappier. And the next thing you know, they're getting some kind of, gastric bypass surgery or something, they're getting a stent in their heart, or, their body just can't take it. And the medical industry is not doing them any favors. Once they get a hold of them and get them on the allopathic treadmill, they become, over-the-counter, drug junkies. That's just the way it is. And they don't understand that there is a more natural and organic and harmonic way of controlling their body weight. But there's something more about it. It's not just, there's a dysfunction. There's a dysfunction in the system. It's in the collective system. It's in the individual system. And I think a lot of the dysfunction happens because people understand that the world is really fucked up. And I get a sense a lot of these people have just given up. And what they do is they bond together in kind of their roly-poly families, and they've kind of made this, they've closed the circle, because they can't handle the what's going on in the world. They can't. That's my take. And so they would just rather be doused in denial and feed themselves and try to comfort themselves, because they don't know what to do. And if they're not aware of the situation from being able to break down the news to whatever degree that they can, clearly they're aware on some nonverbal level, on some subtle level. We are all instinctual. No matter how many pounds of armor you put on, you are still an instinctual being. I don't care if you're an organic portal or if you're a soul being or whatever it is, you're still instinctual. And we are feeling the threat in our immediate space and not always able to articulate it. I think it's one of the most deceptive conditions of our time. Because if you look around, there's no rioting in our streets. If you look around, there's no massive disasters. They happen. Don't get me wrong, they happen. But by and large, what we see in our immediate environment reflects a continuity. We get up, the sun rises, we go to work. There are certain shows that have been on TV like CSI Miami or CSI Las Vegas for a very long period of time, or whatever. Pick a TV show that's been on for a number of years, Judge Judy. And these shows give us continuity, a sense that everything is sort of still in place. But it's not. Things are not still in place. Beneath all of that, there are major changes happening at warp speed. And I think people are aware of it on some level, and they can't do anything about it. And yet, they see everything around them kind of looks the same, even though maybe Uncle Bill lost his job at the plant and is now working down at 7-Eleven pumping 18-ounce sodas. Maybe that's the biggest change in their lives. But certainly there is a disconnect between the reality, the consensual reality that seems to have a narrative thread that runs through it of consistency and the underlying sweeping changes that are taking place. It's called cognitive dissonance. I've talked about it before. And I believe that that's why we have such a psychically and emotionally fractured society. That's where we are. And it's because people can't really grasp the changes that are taking place based on the fact that reality kind of shows up the same for the most part every day, for the most part. And people need something to live for and to have some tether of hope to the future. I don't know what that is for some of these people. Maybe it's their kids, certainly not their bodies. They've given up on their bodies. They've pulled the plug on any kind of body awareness. It's weird, it's like I could see why the eugenicists would make a call to exterminate 80% of the population or 90% of the population. I get that. But what they don't understand is that they're the ones that have created the conditions for the most part. They're the ones through the inequities of the socioeconomic and governance systems. They're the ones that help create the condition. Now, ultimately, everybody's got to be responsible for their experience. That's just the way it is. Me, you, everyone. So we can't blame them. But if we look at the system has been set up in a way that, it traps a lot of people. And in the United States, I hate to say this, but, we were suckered. We were totally suckered. And we were put on the cruise control of cheap money and easy credit. We were totally suckered. As long as we could theoretically convince ourselves that we were wealthy and we had everything that we needed and we can get the new toys and live our lives as mini oligarchs, amateur oligarchs, everything was kind of okay, right? I mean, that's what happened. We got narcoticized and we got hooked on cheap money and cheap food and cheap gas. Living was good here. Living was easy here. And then slowly but surely they began to change the game. And gas got a lot more expensive and food got a lot more expensive and money wasn't as cheap. And, this is where we are now, and turning off the spigots. So it was a revelation for me to go to that place and see these people. Wow, mind blowing. Meanwhile, the world goes on. I get off one roller coaster and I'm back on another, and that's the global roller coaster. If you're not paying attention to what's happening in Syria, it's pretty serious. There is the drums of war are beating pretty heavily there. We've got some major powder kegs. Greece, by the way, I don't know how the Greek drama of the drachma and the euro is stunning, absolutely stunning. So the Greeks voted. Seems like the Greeks are having an election every 6 months now, doesn't it? They're going to vote these people out, and these people in, and these people out, and these people in. It's just bizarre, absolutely bizarre. So now they've voted again, and they decided to vote in the austerity government. And recently they just voted out the austerity government. And now the Greek people theoretically have voted for austerity instead of getting out of the euro. So Germany breathes a sigh of relief because they don't have to go down there and send their troops into. What would they do anyway? I mean, what would they do? And there is rumors that Germany would send troops down to Greece. Would they pluck out their olive trees? I mean, what would they do? Would they commandeer the Retsina factories? What would they do? Anyway, the Greek drama has abated for now because they've all voted for austerity. So that powder keg has been diffused for the moment. There are other powder kegs, i.e. Italy and Spain. We're talking the pig countries, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain. I guess you could throw Cyprus in there. I'm going to talk about Cyprus in a minute because Cyprus just got to bail out. Meanwhile, Syria, now far from Greece, is really teetering on the edge. Bashar Assad is doing everything in his power to hold on to his power. Now, here's what I know. Okay, I don't live in Syria. I don't know many Syrian people, but here's what I know. There were about 5 sovereign nations. Sovereign meaning they had zero debt and they did not belong to the World Bank. Well, they had relationships with the World Bank, but they were not beholden to the World Bank, and they were not beholden to the IMF. There were about 5 of them. 5 sovereign nations with zero debts. Do you know which ones they were? Well, Libya was one. Sudan, another. Yemen, Syria, Iran. Do you see the connection here? Do you understand what's happening? These people are being brought into the fold. These countries are being brought into the fold quickly by hook or by crook, mostly by crook, and destabilized, and their leaders and the regimes are being replaced. We saw this with Hosni Mubarak, who was, by the way, a very close friend of the United States. He kept Egypt really clamped down for many years. And the secret police of Egypt were brutal, absolutely brutal. And only when he was no longer needed, only when it was time to bring Egypt into the fold, just like everybody else, was he outed as being a cruel and inhuman dictator. The same thing happened with Libya. Same thing happened with Yemen. We're seeing something similar happen in the Sudan. Good luck in the Sudan, by the way. And we're seeing it happen in Syria. A sovereign country with zero debt. Think about that. And what happens? Oh, these people, these rebels they're tired of the brutal Assad regime. But I've gone through the pogrom program, the pogroming, of how this all works. It all starts. I mean, if you want to figure out, if you want to see the breakdown of how this works, you just look at Panama and what happened with Panama. And it all started with Omar Torrijos and started with the Panama Canal and how Torrijos. This is what happens. These guys have a sense of national pride. And even if they're like, the puppet for a while, they've got family that lives there. They've got blood relations. The soil is in their DNA, and they say, "Hey, I'm going to do well by this country. I'm going to do something for this country." And that's what happened with Torrijos, who for a long time was an American ally down in Central America, and he was vesting control of the Panama Canal. He was taking control of his country. Think about that. Well, mysteriously he dies in a plane crash. And who do they put into power? But Manuel Noriega, one of his generals. Noriega does the same thing. He's the good soldier. He's the guy that is, moving the cocaine, the white flake. He's the cocaine guy. and he gets uppity and decides that he wants to again, do more for the people of Panama. And he probably wanted more of a cut, to be honest with you, of his cocaine trade. And first thing that happens is there's a demonization that takes place. You see it in the press. Oh, he's brutal. Well, he was our friend 6 months ago. Now he's brutal. He's brutal. And you get these, you get people in their quote-unquote eyewitness accounts, or now it's something on YouTube, or, whatever the scant evidence is to back up the claim that the regime is brutal and dictatorial. So you see that, and then all of a sudden it's like, let's have an investigation. And some clown in Capitol Hill leads some, bogus investigation, goes down to a certain place and maybe even visits Panama. Who knows? That's what Leo Ryan did down in Guyana. Well, Leo Ryan, that was a whole other thing. But anyway, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, he's a brutal fucking dictator. Tell you what we've got to do. We've got to implement sanctions. We have to cut off their ability to feed themselves. And then what happens? Well, the people are hungry. Gee, what happens when people are hungry? They riot. People can't get food, they are pissed off. It's a survival mechanism. So guess what? Now the dictator has to fend off the rioters, which now reinforces the fact that he is a bad dude. Oh, he's terrible. We've got to send people down there. Look at him. And this is what happens time and time again. This is the serial formula for regime change. Now, it may differ, a few degrees depending upon the country, but this is what we're seeing in Syria right now. And Assad is, he's fighting for his life, because what would happen if he said, okay, I'll see you later, I'll leave, I'm out of here? Do you think that guy could last 6 months if he just decided to, I tell you what, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being the president of Syria. Go ahead, you run the country for a while. I'll just step back. I've got a lot of money. Maybe I can buy a soccer team in Europe. Do you think that they would let him? Or do you think that if he said, hey, you know what, tired of Syria, I'm leaving the country. I'm going to go hang out in Tucson. Do you think that they would let that would be allowed? Once these guys are deposed or leave, they don't last more than 6 months. Trust me. Unless, of course, you're Manuel Noriega and you're locked up in a Supermax. He's fighting for his life. He's not just fighting for his country's life. He's fighting for his life. People don't understand that right now. And it's not just his life, but it's the life of his family. It's the life of people around him. That's what he's fighting for. Now, what's happening there is that the Russians have moved part of their navy into a port, and the port is called Tartus. And I decided to look up Tartus. I wanted to see what the history of Tartus was. It's a very important city. It's a port city, and really Tartus is the place where Europe, and particularly Greece and Rome, and as we'll see a little bit later, the Knights Templar landed. This is a very important port, not only strategically, but also historically. And the Russians have just moved part of their navy there. Now, there's been rumblings that the Obama administration is about to okay airstrikes. Now, think about that. Airstrikes. This is a country that has not, and I repeat, has not waged war on any of their neighbors. This is a theoretical coup. It's not even a theoretical, it's a coup that's happening from within. And most of the people that are on the ground in Syria are not the Syrian rebels. We've seen this before. We saw it in Libya. We've seen it in other places. That's what's happening there now. Now, the tricky part is that Russia has a fair amount invested in Syria. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because, right now, Russia and the United States are also at the same time, training together here in this country. They're doing these little national emergency exercises, and the Russians are involved. So on the one hand, see this is why people weigh 300 pounds, even though they don't understand it or break it down like this. On some level, they get it. Well, think of the madness. Over here, America is training with the Russians in the United States. Over here, America might be ready to go to war with the Russians in Syria. But this is the madness of the planet right now. Everybody, if you're a gambler, right, this is what high-stakes gamblers do. High-stakes gamblers hedge their bets, and they're going to win somewhere. Maybe if it's a 10-to-1 wager, they're going to win a lot of money. But they could throw down, say, $200 on a 10-to-1 wager, and they could throw $2,000 or $20,000 on a 2-to-1 wager. And they're going to win. So this is, once people understand that there is no good guy and bad guy in this planet, that it's just a network of collusion, then they'll figure out that there is something really amiss. I think we're getting there, but there's a lot of layers to get to from that place. Let me read a little bit about TARDIS because it's important. This is the history of TARDIS. So TARDIS, the history of it goes back to the 2nd millennium BC. That's a ways back. And it was a Phoenician colony. Now, the Phoenicians were the master sailors of the planet. The Phoenicians went everywhere. And I mean everywhere. The Phoenicians were in Mexico, Central America. The Phoenicians were in America or North America. The Phoenicians were everywhere. When you look at something like in China, they found the remnants of a Caucasian group of Caucasians that predated the Chinese. They found them there, and the Chinese don't like to talk about this because it totally fucks up their history. And well, the reason why they found them there is because they were Phoenicians. So the colony was known as Antardis, which is Greek, and Anti-Arados, or Anti-Aradus, which means the town facing Arwad. Arwad is an island off the coast of Syria. Okay. This is from Wikipedia, by the way. Not much remains of the Phoenician Antaratus, the mainland settlement that was linked to the more important and larger settlements of Ardis off the shore of Tardis in the nearby sites of Emrit. The city was called Antardis in classical Latin. The city was favored, get this now, the city was favored by Emperor Constantine. This is the guy that flipped the Romans to Christianity, really for political control more than anything else. Okay, he was a butcher, but that's what he did. He took a, or I believe it was Clovis. I took a page out of his playbook, and he flipped the Gauls, or the Franks rather. He flipped them to Christianity too. It was a Constantine move. The city was favored by Emperor Constantine for its devotion to the cult of the Virgin Mary. The first chapel to be dedicated to the Virgin is said to have been built here in the 3rd century. Think about that. This place where theoretically the war for Syria might start in Tartus, a port city, which is where the Russians are now bringing their ships, was the very first place that the Virgin Mary, the first chapel of the Virgin Mary, was constructed. Think about that. With many of these places, you see them change hands over time. It'll be Christian, it'll be Muslim, occasionally it might be Semitic / Jewish, but it's usually flipping between the Christians and the Muslims. So the Muslims captured and conquered Tartus in 636. And guess what? They needed to be captured and liberated again. And of course, this happens during the Crusades. The Crusaders called the city Antartus and also Tortosa. It was first captured by Raymond of St. Gilles, who was a famous crusader and a famous Knights Templar, by the way. It was left to his son Alfonso Jordan and was known as Tortosa. In 1123, the Crusaders built the Church of Our Lady of Tortosa, which is another shrine to the Virgin Mary. It now houses this altar and has received many pilgrims. So this, Tortosa, Tartus, Antartus, is a sacred site. Not only is it sacred for the Christians, the cathedral itself was used as a mosque after the Muslim reconquest of the city. Then, as a barracks by the Ottomans, it was renovated under the French and is now the city museum containing antiquities recovered from Amrit and many other sites in the region. Nur ad-Din Zangi retrieved Tartus from the Crusaders for a brief time before he lost it again in 1152. In 1152, Tortosa was handed to the Knights Templar, who used it as a military headquarters. They engaged in some major building projects, constructing a castle with a large chapel and an elaborate keep surrounded by thick double concentric walls. The Templars' mission was to protect the city and surrounding lands, which had been captured by Christian settlers from Muslim attack. The city of Tortosa was recaptured by Saladin in 1188, and the main Templar headquarters relocated to Cyprus. However, in Tortosa, some Templars were able to retreat into the keep, which they continued to use as a base for the next 100 years. So the Templars probably never left Syria and Tortosa. They steadily added to its fortifications until it also fell in 1291. Tortosa was the last outpost of the Templars on the Syrian mainland, after which they retreated to a garrison on the nearby island of Arwad, which they kept for another decade. So if it was the last outpost of the Templars in Syria, it was probably the last outpost of the Templars in the Middle East. And here we go. It's really the first potential conflagration point for what could be, theoretically, the start of World War III. Now, I don't know how much you actually watch TV. I watch it. I seldom watch TV. I'm not a TV guy, but I seem to catch key moments on television. And I saw a couple of weeks ago where Barack Obama was talking with Medvedev, and it was basically he whispered to him, "Hey, I just need a few more months." The amount of what I would call kinship and amiability between Obama and Medvedev was quite pronounced. I mean, these are two guys that are obviously very fond of one another, extremely fond of one another. There was all kinds of love going down between Obama and Medvedev. So this whole relationship with Russia is absolutely and utterly puzzling. I mean, it's not puzzling on some level, but it's one of those things that just can drive you nutty if you try to break it down and think about it and put it in a model of good guys and bad guys and black and white. It just doesn't fit, because it doesn't. It doesn't. Anyway, on a global scale, potentially, World War III theoretically could go down and start in TARDIS. What else is happening out there in the world that is even remotely interesting? I was on a pretty cool radio show last night. And it was one of those things where it just kind of happened. So life is interesting, to say the least, okay? Through one of my readers, I was connected with Sister Myra, who I had on the show a couple of times. We did that Super Bowl show, which was just, I think, one of the best shows that I've done, to be honest with you. And we broke down the symbolism of the Super Bowl. What's interesting, here's a side note, she talked about how the Super Bowl is being used, the halftime show is being used to promote an agenda, right? And for Sister Myra, it was the gay agenda, or the homosexual agenda and homosexual programming. And you can certainly see that with these it wasn't just that. There was other layers of programming as well. But that's part of it. And I found out that for the next Super Bowl, the headliner for the next Super Bowl is Barry Manilow. And there you go. You know, here's a guy that cut his teeth playing in gay bathhouses in New York City. And everybody loves Barry Manilow. Who doesn't love Barry Manilow? One of the most beloved entertainers of our time. But it doesn't matter whether you love him or not. I mean, it's from a symbolic level, it's interesting that here's this guy, you know, who's going to be headlining the suit. It's not a rock and roll band. It's not a testosterone. It's not Aerosmith. It's not the Rolling Stones. It's not AC/DC, although AC/DC might be appropriate for the Super Bowl, apparently. It's not any of these things. Not any of those bands. It's Barry Manilow. And it's not even some really hot female artist, which would, raise the testosterone level of the man watching the halftime show. It's Barry Manilow. Anyway. So I met Sister Myra, and through Sister Myra, I've connected up with a number of different people on Facebook who are very interesting people. And I wrote about this on Facebook probably, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And it was just a brief comment. And the majority of these people are African American, and they're from the South. They're from places like North Carolina and Georgia and Florida, Louisiana. And they're really very enlightened people, super enlightened, and very turned on to astrology, and incredibly articulate, and open to thinking outside the lines, meaning that they are willing to embrace alternative research, aka conspiracy theory, in ways that other people just aren't. It's fascinating, and they're really good people. So I immediately felt this kind of spiritual kinship with these Kemetic mystics, these Southern Kemetic mystics. And so I connected with Coach Kair, who is very close to Sister Myra, and he's got over 4,000 friends on Facebook. So we've been connecting, and last night he posted on my wall and wanted me to come over on his radio show called Cosmophysics, and it's kind of an astrological roundtable And it was cool. And so I actually went on the show. I was on there. I listened for a long time because I just wanted to absorb what they were doing. And there was a lot of really profound astrological insight going down on that show. And one of these days, in the next month or two, I'm going to have some of those guys from Kair's show come over to my show on Wednesday, and we'll do kind of a similar thing and try to bridge these worlds a little bit, because I thought it was a very cool mix. And I was just absolutely thrilled. You can listen to that. You can hear that show, by the way. All you've got to do is look up Coach Kair on Blog Talk Radio, and you can hear last night's show. I'm on in the latter third of the show, and I did a live reading for somebody, which was an interesting experience in and of itself. So that happened last night, and one of the things that we talked about on the show is Rodney King, and how Rodney King died at 6:11 in the morning here on the West Coast, and it was 9:11 on the East Coast. An interesting synchronicity. And Rodney King had a stellium of planets in Aries. And I'm actually working on the newsletter right now and putting a lot of that information in the newsletter. And as it leads up to the square, the big square we have coming up with Pluto and Uranus, which could be a real heavy square. If you want to look at a potential flashpoint for something heavy going down in a place like Syria, it would be that Uranus-Pluto square. So anyway, I time traveled a bit last night, and I was looking at 3 key players in Los Angeles during that time, which was really roughly from 1991 to about 1994, which is where we had kind of the civil unrest, I guess, would be one way to describe it, with the Rodney King riots, where 52 people died, by the way. And those riots lasted 5 days. So I looked at that, and I looked at who the players were during that experience. And then I looked at O.J. Simpson, because O.J. Simpson is a key figure in Los Angeles during that time. And while he's not a key figure in the riots, he does figure into what happens on the backside of the riots. And as I was looking at O.J. Simpson yesterday, I realized, as I delved into his past, that yesterday was the 18th anniversary of the day that O.J. Simpson and Al Callings, AC, drove down the highway in the white Bronco. Now think about where you were. Maybe you didn't see this. If you didn't see this, you were living in a cave somewhere, because it was everywhere. They interrupted every single program on national TV and even on local TV to show O.J. Simpson driving at a snail's pace down a freeway in Southern California with a line of cop cars behind him, only to go back to his Brentwood mansion. What the hell was that about? What was that about? Was he really just going to sneak across the border to Mexico and, wear a beard and have 10,000? I mean, what was that all about? I'll tell you what it was about. That moment was the first trumpet, theoretically, of the apocalypse. Behold a pale horse. What is a white Bronco? It is a pale horse. And it was beamed into everybody's living room. And what happened to O.J. Simpson? O.J. Simpson got off. He got off. Now, apparently, according to Keith Richard, Al Callings told Keith Richard that O.J. did it. Now, there's a lot of weird stuff that went on with the O.J. Simpson trial. There was a lot of weird stuff around Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman. They were dealing cocaine. That's what was going on with him. Ronald Goldman was not her lover. Ronald Goldman was gay. And apparently Nicole had gotten in over her head. Now, some people are suggesting that the Yakuza was involved, the Mexican Mafia was involved, but clearly O.J. Simpson was also involved. And that O.J. Simpson, maybe his kids were being threatened. I don't know what the scene was with him, but apparently there was that he was being forced into doing this thing with Nicole and Ron. One way or another, he was going to be involved in it. He got off. And what happened was that it was a breach in the justice system. It was a total breach. And it's like a movie when at the end of a monster film or horror film, the monster dies and gets put back in the box. Unless, of course, it's what's his name? God, I'm having a blank moment. Clarice Starling. You know what I'm talking about. Hannibal Lecter. Thank you. My producer just told me Hannibal Lecter. Unless, of course, it's Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter was not put back in the box. Psychically, Hannibal Lecter is out there in our consciousness. And at the end of the O.J. trial, clearly, O.J. was not put back in the box. Justice, theoretically, was not served. Now, there was a civil suit, which the Goldmans won, by the way. So O.J. was convicted civilly, but he wasn't convicted criminally. Now, churn that up. It's another just complete and utter element of madness. Okay, he's guilty here, but he's not guilty here. So what happened was that O.J. was let loose. The monster was theoretically let loose. And if you, there's a film that I recommend. It's called The Rapture, and it's with Mimi Rogers and David Duchovny. It's an interesting film. There's layers to the film that are fascinating, but there's a scene at the end of the movie where the rapture is actually taking place. And Mimi Rogers is in a jail somewhere in the desert in Southern California. And there are TVs in the jail. And on the TVs, there's a football game being played. And the game is with the Trojans of USC, which is the team that O.J. Simpson played for. That's what you see on the screen at the moment of the rapture in the movie. And then the first trumpet sounds, and there is a rider on a white horse. And he's blowing the trumpet like a Roman centurion. And the rapture came out right around the same time as O.J.'s trip down the LA freeway. And that happened yesterday. Yesterday was the 18th anniversary of that event. And if you look at the three players, O.J. Simpson, Mayor Tom Bradley, who was the mayor during the Rodney King riots, and Rodney King, they form a cardinal T-square. Rodney King, Aries, Tom Bradley, Capricorn, O.J. Simpson, Cancer. It's a cardinal T-square. Three of the most important players, all three of which were African American, during Los Angeles from 1991 to about 1994-95. And we're looking at potentially another situation like that with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. And that will likely get played out in September with the second T-square of Uranus and the second square of Uranus and Pluto. The first happens in just a few short weeks. What's interesting about it's a September 20th date, by the way, which happens close to the autumnal equinox. Saturn is at 28 degrees at that time, and it sits right on top of George Zimmerman's Pluto in Libra. So it's an interesting time. With these two squares, one happening in a couple of weeks and the one that happens in September, we're dealing with two very powerful flashpoints. So hang on to your seats, boys and girls. Buckle in, because you're about to go on the Green Lantern, theoretically. Happy birthday to fake Paul McCartney, a.k.a. Fall. It's his birthday today, whoever that guy is. It's interesting because today is also the birthday of Amanda Lear. Amanda Lear is one of the first transsexuals that really popped onto the pop music scene, and she was on the cover of a Roxy Music record. Amanda Lear was linked with David Bowie. In fact, she shows up in one of David Bowie's videos as a dancer. It's Amanda Lear's birthday today. Gemini. It's appropriate, don't you think? I do. Okay, so we've reached the end of the show, and I want to thank everybody for listening and tuning in. Even though I didn't spend much time in the chat room, I'll just drop in the last couple minutes. I'll be back on Wednesday with Navigating the Astrological Matrix, and I'm trying to get another guest on. I've been enjoying this Jupiter and Gemini thing. I got into that roundtable experience. I'm going to try to get somebody on Wednesday. I've got somebody in mind. We'll see if he'll jump in on the proceedings. So you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to sip when it's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. This has been the Monday Mashup. I'll see you on Wednesday.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.